Well, hi, folks. We have an important date coming up, which is July 13th, and that's the 100th anniversary of the wedding of Lillian. And so there's going to be a lot of information on what's going to happen at that point, but we decided to do it twice, and it's good to see all of you. And then I went back to Lynn and I said, I forgot everything I was going to say. And then my wife said, just open your mouth. It'll all come out. Lillian was a beautiful young lady, and the local girl made good. Lillian Marie Bounds was born in Spalding in 1899. She was the youngest of 10 children. And her mom and dad, here's a picture of her mom and dad, Nettie. And look at the dates, 1854, she was born in Vancouver, Washington Territory. And her husband was born in Oregon Territory in 1854. Her husband was a blacksmith, a justice of the peace, and also he was a federal deputy sheriff. And he was the one on wagons that brought $650,000 worth of gold coins to the Nez Perce tribe on the reservation to pay for that loss of all their land. He was on that buckboard. So Willard, right there, and Nettie, very interesting childhood because she was on the basketball team at Lapwai High School. And she was 15 years old, and the Lewiston Morning Tribune talked about her making 6 points during a game. Now look at how they're dressed, okay? Because young ladies at that time could not play full court, only half court, because otherwise they might glow. Remember, horses sweat, men perspire, and women glow, and you can't have women glowing. So you can see how they are dressed, and Lewiston High School looked the same. Well, this is a photograph in Lapwai where Nettie and Willard raised their 10 kids. And those kids didn't leave and go too far, but the three, Nettie sitting down, mom sitting down, 1915. Remember, she's about 16 years old at that point, Lillian. So Lillian's on the left, and then there is Hazel, and you can hear her name, and you can see Ruth also as they grew up. Still trying to figure out exactly where that was in Lapwai. So a lot of research went into it, but I'm still trying to figure out the ladies on the right-hand side. Well, it was called Fort Lapwai High School, and in 1917, the class was 20 kids graduated. And here's the arrow points to Lillian. About 2 or 3 of them are missing. They are not, the graduates are not in this photograph, but I wanted to show you a little bit of her personality, Lillian's personality. Look at the look in her eyes. She's got some spunk and independence. Remember, she was the baby and beautiful. The rest of the girls were good looking too, but she's the baby. And the baby, bless the baby of the family. Are you the baby? No? Okay. Do you know what I mean about the littlest one getting the attention? Yeah, there you go. So Lillian then graduates from high school. Well, something happened to her. Her dad dies, and they have to sell the farm, and they come in, Nettie and Lillian move into Lewiston on First Avenue, 325 First. So if you're standing there looking at that house, if you went to your left, you'd be going towards Prospect on Normal Hill. and it's First Avenue, so there's only one or two more streets to the edge of the bluff. And so if you go to the right, you go down First Avenue, and First Avenue is where the steps are that are still existing in Lewiston on 5th Street. This house right there is Idaho's first millionaire, John Bulmer's house. And that was destroyed in the 1950s. Well, she walked downtown. That was the old Owl Drug right there, the Weisgerber building, which burned down. But you can still walk down. And I do the steps up and down when I walk because I love walking through Normal Hill. And I do it early in the morning. Well, this is a good time in 1917 with your best buds. Look at their hair. Isn't that great? This was a hot Saturday night because there wasn't much of anything to do. You didn't have television, and the radio, you could see how primitive it was, but this is the kind of entertainment that Lily had and her classmates and her friends in Lewiston. Oh, in 1921, the hotel opened up, so they were constructing that. So Lily, as she worked downtown, then she would see the construction, and you could go and sit in the lobby of the old hotel. This is what it looked like. And occasionally there would be a Christmas dance or dances because there was the ballroom. And a 35-piece orchestra would be playing above the ballroom. Or in 1921, the Liberty Theater opened up, and it was really concentrating on playing movies. But there were silent movies. Charlie Chaplin, Clara Bow, and you can see sort of suggested there on the, I mean, they had no censorship in those days. And it was really interesting because in the old days, then they had an orchestra, and the orchestra played to the music to the silent movies. Da 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 da, and the cowboy would go in and he'd go. And then the screen would go black and it'd say, I love you. And then you'd see him, and it would say, come away with me. And then she'd go, and then it'd go, I don't love you. And she'd go like that. And then he'd get on his horse, and they played end of story. And in between was vaudeville. Well, Lily saw this, as all young girls would see this during their formative years. And the fashions and the hairstyle and what they were wearing. And it was a dream that they could be involved some way in the movies or movie stars or go someplace to get closer to that. Well, Lily was a smart young lady, and she went to Lewiston Business College for a year. It used to be in the 1920s in the Thiessen building. The Thiessen building is no longer there because in 1960 they determined that urban renewal was to tear down all the old buildings and put beautiful, beautiful buildings, not that's sarcastic, in their place. So 4th Street came through. This building's still here. This is Bojack's. Right here is Bojack's, and the awning goes over a barbershop that has been a barbershop since 1896. It's the oldest continuous business use in the valley. It's still there today. And this is the Means building. Whoop, push the wrong button. And over here is the Means building, and that's that white block building on D Street. So you can see this is where the college was also, and you can still see this sign today on Main Street when you're going east. You can still see that sign. It says Lewiston Business College. Well, the girls took stenography, and they took typing classes, and Lily did that. I've looked at every one of these photographs. She's not in there because they rotated it huge number of girls. And they rotated the girls, and because girls were able to get into the workforce, because the movement to give women the vote and rights started in the western states. Then women got the right to vote and right to work, and the country's been going downhill since. So anyway, I just wanted to know if you were listening. Thank you. Say, no, I don't believe that, but I just wanted to throw a zinger in so you pay attention. Well, we've been talking about Lillian right here, and up in Idaho, there was also this man named Walter. And Walter was born in Chicago. Now, Walter, interesting story, Walter was named after a reverend, Reverend Walter Robinson Parr. He was the best friend of Eliza Disney in Chicago in the 1890s. And they were such good friends, they made a pact. One of our sons is going to be called after our first names. So Walter Eliza Parr, this man right here, his son, that's his name. And then Eliza Disney, his name, fourth son, was Walter Eliza Disney. So that's where Walt got his name, Walt Disney. Walter Disney. Now, the Reverend became pastor of the Pilgrim Church here in Lewiston in 1901. That's the church today. It's behind the old high school on Normal Hill, still there today, still being used as a church. What's really interesting, Reverend Parr died of influenza in 1922. Lillian was here in 1922, still going to college. He's buried in Normal Hill Cemetery. You know, there's 5 steps, 4 steps, 3 steps away from what we're talking about. It's amazing, the connections. Well, now, Lillian, then in 1923, something happens to both of them, both Walter and Lillian. Well, Lillian's in Lewiston. She's now 23, 24 years old, and she is ready to move on, get out of Podunk, Idaho, and Lewiston. And she's seen the bright lights and all the movie stars, and she wants to get out. She's got the education. So she leaves and goes down because her sister Hazel, remember I said Hazel's going to come back into the story. Her sister Hazel moves down to Southern California. There's a story that Lillian was dating a banker in Lewiston, and the relationship ended. Whether that triggered her to go down and get out of Lewiston. But it's interesting, the story continues. The banker moved to Los Angeles. So I don't know what was happening because Lillian's very, very quiet on her past. Well, also there is a cartoonist in Kansas City because the whole family, the Disney family, had moved to Kansas City. And he was doing cartoons and comic books, and he had a character with a group of other artists. And then he started the art. One of the artists who worked on this cartoon character had the patent, and he left, which means Walt couldn't use it, and Walt went bankrupt. His business failed. And so with $40, he got in a train because his brother Roy, an older brother, was in Los Angeles. And so both of them in 1923 are moving to approximately the same place in Los Angeles. Where was that? And that was the original sign, Hollywoodland. And so why did they move there? Why did Walt move there? Because there was opportunities. The whole entire movie industry was leaving the East Coast. You got cloudy and it snowed. You could go outside. In Los Angeles, it's sunny every day. You could film every day. And the whole industry was moving to the West Coast. And he thought, I can make it. Well, He and his brother then form Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. Lillian is living with her sister, Hazel, and she needs a job. And someone said, there's a job with these two young guys that started their own studio. And she gets a job. She's interviewed and she gets a job. Very small studio. She's an inker, and that means that the artist draws out the character, and then they put a cell, which is clear plastic, on top, and they ink it and put the color in. And so these young ladies are doing this, and the artists are going through this. And to make a movie, you have to have 24 frames every second for your eye to see movement. 24 frames. That means that cartoon character has to do this 24 times in a second so you can see movement. So they have to do these cells. Well, they work long hours, these young ladies, and they need a ride home because it's dark in California and it's cold, and the only one that has a car is Walter. And Walter takes the girls home, and the one sitting in the front cold. And guess who he puts in the front seat? Lillian. And Lillian says, well, she dropped me off first because I live closest to the studio. He never did. He just put her in the front seat. You're sitting next to me. Because he fell in love with her on site. She had to work a little bit at it. But she could tell he was crazy about her. Well, here is a photograph about a year later after she gets a job. Here is Lillian, Walt. This is Ruth Disney. This is Roy Disney. And the happy one right here is Edna, which is Roy's wife. And here, but look in the background, it says Disney Studios, comic books. They were selling comic books and trying to get a character and trying to do short movies. And they were using live actresses and cartooning around them. It was cutting edge for that time period. Well, Hazel looked at Lillian and said, he's gaga over you, don't vamp him, which in the 20s meant don't be flirtatious with him. He's already in love with you. Take it easy on him. Don't vamp him. Well, here's Walt in his car in 1924, same car in 1925. The girls say, why don't you get a car where you could roll up the windows and we're not so cold? And you think, where? In Southern California? Yeah, when the marine air comes in Hollywood, it gets cool at night, no matter how hot it is. Well, Walt says, I indirectly proposed by asking Lillian if I should buy a new car or an engagement ring. Not, I love you, baby. And what did Lillian say? I'll take the ring. So this is how Walt described how they got engaged. Lillian's story is a little bit different. I made $15 a week. Roy, who was a financial part of this partnership, said, would you hold on to that check? Because we could use a little bit of money to pay our bills. It was hand them out. I was living with my sister, so I didn't immediately need the money. So I had a handful of uncashed checks. Walt always said I was so bad as a secretary, made so many mistakes when he was dictating, and they owed me so much money from those uncashed checks that Walt had to marry me. That was her story. Just a great story on the relationship of these two. Well, finally they say, we're going to get married. But Lillian said, I have 9 brothers and sisters and my mother, and they all live right around Lewiston. One lived in Minnesota, Lenore. One lived cul-de-sac. The whole family was spread out, but it was basically here. And so they take a train and when they take the train to Spokane, then I just wanted to show you how you got here. You came from Spokane, stopped at Pullman, stopped at Moscow, stopped at Troy, stopped at Kendrick, stopped at Julietta, and then came to Lewiston. And so it's sort of interesting. And I gave this talk at Troy, so they always applaud at the Troy Historical Society. Well, then on July 13th, 1925, 100 years ago, on the 13th, then they got married. This is Hazel over here. Here's a brother. Here's a sister. She doesn't look happy right now, Lillian. There's Nettie, and there's her other brother, Sid. And Sid lived at 918 3rd Street. And this is the front of the house. Lillian made her own dress in the family. She got married in front of the family. Oh, the house today. This is a picture of it I just took a few weeks ago. It hasn't changed very much. And the backyard, then this is the wedding day in Sid Bound's backyard. Sid was a fireman, and then he became fire chief for Lewiston. And you can see she was very attractive, and he was nuts. If you've ever seen any movies of the two of them interacting, he was all over her. A public display of affection all the time. He was crazy about her. Well, Lillian kept this a secret, but she was almost 3 years older than Walt, and she didn't want anybody to accuse her of being a cradle robber. So she never explained that to anybody. Well, here's a selfie of their honeymoon, and you can see an attractive couple, and Lillian is happy also. And this is their honeymoon, Mount Rainier. And then they took a boat or a cruise boat, a steamer, all the way down back to Los Angeles. But on the trip back, and consequently months, Walt was saying, I got a new cartoon character. I'm thinking of this, that it's going to be a hit. She goes, what's his name? She goes, Mortimer. Or he says, Mortimer. And she says, it sounds like a funeral. What are you doing? No one's going to go. She was both feet on the ground. He was thinking and skimming up at 30,000 feet. Always the creative side of him. She said, that's a dumb name. Mickey. That's a happy name. Mickey Mouse. So she was instrumental in helping Walt all the time. Well, Lillian and Walt returned to Lewiston in 1926, and they took Nettie with them. And she lived with them, they provided for her, and she eventually passed away and is buried down there. Willard is buried in Normal Hill Cemetery. So this is the newspaper article, shows Nettie, and that was a Christmas present for Lily as her nickname, and Walter. Well, this was one of the first Mickey Mouse movies, and it was short, and it was called Plain Crazy. Lindy and the whole United States and the world was Lindbergh, Lucky Lindy, and so they put that together with silent, and then it was re-released with sound later. It says sound right there. This is the first appearance of Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Now, Mickey, look at him, love struck. Look at her. Because from now on, and the next thing is 1928, a sound movie. Sound comes to movies. And this is one of the most influential movies because it had music in it, we're talking, and it was a sound cartoon. And it opened the door for Walt and Walt Disney or Disney Brothers Studios. So Mickey Mouse. Now, that became something they traveled with. They traveled on boats, on airplanes, and always had Mickey Mouse with them because it was what opened the doors and allowed the Walt to start dreaming higher because now he could finance things. Even became his alter ego. You can see that. It's just really ingrained in Walt. Well, look, Walt's optimistic, friendly, playful. Oh, what do you want to do, Minnie? You know, that kind of thing. And look at Minnie. She was independent, focused on being a good homemaker and not putting up with any nonsense. That was Minnie. So that's Lily, and that's Walt. Now, Lily, in 1953, in her diary and memoirs, she said, I was always the one that was sort of not a critic. I can be a severe critic. He always would try things out on me, and I always looked on the dark side. Maybe once in a while I had been right and saved him from mistakes. But I also remember the time Walt was making his first full length picture in 1937. This was an animated full length picture. And what did she say to Walt? I didn't think people would go to see a picture about dwarfs. Well, really interesting, 1938. And all of you, when you were working or still working, you sang the song every time you got in your car to go to work, right? Hi ho, I'm off to work, or we're off to work, go, and, and then you whistle because you were so happy to go to work. Well, some of us were, okay? So anyway, why did she say dwarfs? Because she didn't want to tell them they've always almost been bankrupt. Walt just pushes and pushes, and the money issue, because this film at the time cost $1.5 million to make in 1938. That's a lot of money. And so she was concerned because he had had a breakdown, a mental breakdown, because of the finances and the creativity and wouldn't stop. And she said, "You're coming home. You come home. You have to come home at night. You can't sleep there. You can't work 24 hours a day." And so he was helped by Brother Roy and by Lillian. Well, this first full-length animated movie was a blockbuster, but the Academy Board had never seen anything like this. The Academy didn't know what to do with an animated movie that was knocking the socks off everybody. It was a blockbuster. And so they didn't know what to do with it, so they kept it out of Best Picture, although it was playing over and over again all around the world. So they had an Oscar nomination for Best Musical Score, didn't win. This is the only movie in the history of the Academy that was nominated twice, 2 separate years. And they had to give it something, so it was an honorary for significant screen innovation. And it was a children's movie, and Walt was a child in his artistic endeavors, and Walt was saying, if the kids want to go to it, they'll drag their parents, and the parents will pay for it. And he was completely right, and he hit it. He hit it. So, children, the Academy in 1939 got the most famous child actress ever to award Walt an Academy Award, and gave him something that had never been duplicated, gave him an Academy Award. But look at that, there's 7 little ones for all the dwarfs. Only time in the history of the Academy. So it's really fascinating to look at this. And Shirley Temple wanted to do it. She goes, "Oh yeah, he's made all my friends happy." Now, to put it in perspective, adjusted for inflation, been one of the top 10 performers in North America, and it's the highest grossing animated film with an adjusted gross income. A little drum roll on this one. That's not millions, that's billions. And still is being played. And they remade Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it flopped. And you still can see it, 1938, you can still see it today. Well, this did it. This catapulted the Disney studios into worldwide recognition, and the two of them were on covers of magazines, Hollywood tabloids. They were the center of attention. They were the top. They were, and it was a husband and wife, and he always had her come with him, and that was part of what she did. But actually, if you look right down here on the bottom, the two children, they lived simply out of Hollywood world. That's because that was her job. And she told Walt that was her job. Well, in 1939, now we can finance things. And the studio is small. And he said, well, there's nothing in Los Angeles on the Hollywood side. In Los Angeles, there's not enough. So we're going to go on the other side of the Hollywood Hills, and that's the San Fernando Valley. And in 1939, he bought all the land for Disney Studios in the San Fernando Valley. And so my wife and I have hiked up there, okay, to the Hollywood sign, because I was raised right over here. And I'll get to that in a minute. But this is where, on the other side, you can see why they would buy that. Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, Walt Disney, the Warner Brothers, all started moving out to the valley so they could buy large tracts of land. And Bob Hope became a billionaire in today's, and he lived right around the corner. I'll show you where he lived. Well, this is where Walt's home was. Here's the Hollywood sign they were looking at. And then this is where he bought. And this is Griffith Park, one of the largest completely inside the city of Los Angeles. It's huge. It has pony rides and equestrian trails. It has a merry-go-round. It has a zoo in it. It has a travel town. It has a museum. It's an art museum today. It's where everything sort of municipal attractions is. Walt then bought the land on the other side of the Hollywood that we're just looking, Hollywood sign that we're looking at. But you see over here is Warner Brothers and Universal Studios. Bob Hope lives right on Toluca Lake. And it's a small golf course that he built. So when I was a high school student, we used to go to a friend's house that was right across the street from Bob Hope's house. And when parties happened, she'd call us up and go, come over, we'll sit out on the front and drink our pop, and we'll wave at all of the big limousines, and pretty soon the windows go down. It's those kids again and wave at us. Who is that? Who is that? And they'd go to a party at Bob Hope's house, which was located not too far away from where I lived. So this is one thing. You see this? It goes right into Walt's studio, and it's called Buena Vista Street. When I was born, my parents took me home to 2128 North Buena Vista Street, Burbank, California, down the street from the Disney Studios. So I've come full circle. So this was the logo for 50 years, but every time you saw a Disney movie, you saw this. And that's because it's located on Buena Vista Street in Burbank. And you would see this because this is on the studio. And you can see the seven dwarfs are holding it up, and Walt's holding Mickey's hand and you can drive by there and take photographs. Not quite as close as this, but you can see these on Buena Vista Street. Now, remember Griffith Park. Griffith Park then had a merry-go-round. And Lillian and Walt had two daughters. And if you look behind them, you can see the merry-go-round, which is in Griffith Park. And Walt would take those girls, and as long as they wanted to ride, they rode. And he'd sit on a bench and watch them. Because Lillian said, you have to take them out. Saturdays and Sundays, you're going to come home and you're going to take them out. She kept them grounded. And Walt and Lillian rode horses through Griffith Park. And he sent his artists to the zoo in Griffith Park to animate animals and draw the animals. And also the compounds that they were living in. So it's very essential to know a little bit about Griffith Park because it was part of Walter and part of Lillian. Well, Walt's dream started in 1932. He had a dream that if I can get those kids to the movie, I can get them to a park. And if I can get them to a park, their parents are going to have to bring them to the park. He wasn't motivated by money. He was motivated by it's entertaining. He was like a little kid in many, many ways. Well, this was the park, but there wasn't enough room because all the studios were buying all the land. And so you couldn't put it in Burbank. There wasn't enough land. So Walt started looking after he had the capital, and he decided that he was going to take it about 30 miles south, where there was less people, and there was a little tiny town. And all of it was agricultural, and they were raising oranges. So he bought a large tract because now his dream got expanded. Huge, huge expansion of the park and the banks. And this is Disneyland, and it was located in the midst of orange groves. And when they were building it, you can see the orange groves right here, right next to the park that they were trying to complete in 1955. Back up just a minute, and back up here. This is the freeway coming through here. It's called the Golden State Freeway. You call it I-5. Down in California, there's names for it. There's no numbers. It's a Golden State or the San Diego or the that Santa Monica Freeway or the Ventura Freeway. If you live down there, you say the names or used to. I know that all these orange groves were here because 2 months after Disneyland opened up, my dad took 4 of us kids, the 4 kids. And we drove through miles and miles and miles of orange groves that were blossoming. It was so heavy, and my brother had asthma, and he started to have an asthma attack. And the 3 of us were like, you can't. We're going to Disneyland. You'll die first. Shut up. And we're in the back seat. Dad's going, we're going to Disneyland. And my brother's going, like that. Shh, quiet. Trying to put something over his mouth. And he was the oldest one. But he was okay because he wanted to go also to Disneyland. Well, remember I told you Griffith Park. Here's one of the horses this is in the Disney Museum. Here's the bench they sat on, and he bought the bench from the city in Griffith Park. And so it was completely part of what he was thinking of, and he had ball with his daughters. And this is in Disneyland, and also he loved trains. And that's in Disneyland. And what's really interesting, that love for trains went back because he worked when he was a teenager. He worked selling peanuts and candy on trains when they stopped at the station, and he'd run through and then take them to the next station and hop on the train coming back home. And so the trains, he had a fascination with trains, and to the point where Lillian even allowed him to put a tunnel underneath her rose garden at their estate. And look at the look on his face. He took all the kids and all his daughter's kids or friends on these trains. Well, it's really interesting because there's a special car that's used in Disneyland, and look at the name of it. Lilybell. And then there's a photograph inside that car, and you pay a little bit extra to sit inside the car, and it's Walt and Lillian. And this is on Main Street, the Lily's Boutique. And you can see that his dedication to his wife pops up over and over again. And he loves steamboats. Now, you can see the proud look on his face when he's standing on the top deck of the steamboat. And this was called the Mark Twain. But when Disney World in Florida was built, this is the name of the steamboat. And look at the name of the lake that they built. Port of Lake Buena Vista. So that name pops up again. So in 1955, Disneyland opened on the 17th. And they warned the women who came on opening day, don't wear high heels because the asphalt is still hot and you'll lose your shoes because the workmen were still working on it and had just put the asphalt on Main Street that night. And it wasn't cured and it was soft. I mean, that's how they were feverishly working. Well, that was the official date, but something happened July 13th. 300 people were invited to a party in the unfinished Disneyland because it was the 30th anniversary of Lillian and Walt Disney's wedding. 300 people were brought in and taken to Frontierland. They got on the Mark Twain paddle wheeler steamboat. They were given mint juleps with alcohol. And they took a cruise around Tom Sawyer's Island, came back, and then went for dinner at the Golden Horseshoe Saloon. So those 300 people were the first group that came in, even though it was not done. This is Sharon and Diane. And so we need to know a little bit about the children here. Diane was born in 1933, but Lillian had a lot of issues, miscarriages, really had some problems before and after. And Walt and Lillian decided they couldn't, the health of Lillian was too important, and so they adopted Sharon, 1936. And so there's the two girls that I showed you before. This is Sharon and Diane. She was born in 1936 in November. Walt and Lillian adopted her on December 31st. She always used that as her birthday. For the rest of her life said, I was born December 31st. Well, they traveled all over, and here is when they were a little bit older. And Diane didn't even know, because remember, Lillian's job was to keep it away from Hollywood, keep her family, and it was sacred for Disney, Walt to come home and be in an environment where he didn't have any stress and no one was asking questions. And so Diane went to school and said, they all asked me if my dad was Walt Disney. And when he came home, she goes, are you Walt Disney? Yeah, that's my name. No, are you the Walt Disney? And he said, yes. That was the first time she knew her dad was anything but Dad. Well, you can see the joy on his face with both girls, and 1933 and 1936, and you can see the girls later. You know, Diane's on the far side, Sharon's right here. Beautiful ladies. Here is the wedding grouping of Diane, and she lived to be 80. And this is her husband, which was a football player, professional football player. And that is Sharon over on the side. And Diane co-founded the Walt Disney Family Museum, and she was president of the board of directors of the foundation. And then they traveled together, always had Mickey with them in some form. They traveled together, and this is Diane. And if you look at the face structure, you can see there's a resemblance. And this was Sharon when she grew up. Very beautiful. She was in a movie. Walt had, she had a little bit part in a movie, and she was elected to the board of directors of the Walt Disney Company. She unfortunately died early. And the kids, which would have been the grandkids, are still involved in the foundation. Well, you can see from one of those, get in the booth and take your photographs. As they got older, it didn't diminish. It did not diminish this love for one another. And this is one of the last photographs of them together. They were married 41 years, and Walt died in 1966. Across the street from Disney Studios is St. Joseph's Hospital. And I worked in St. Joseph's Hospital in 62, 63, 64. I was working in the hospital across the street, not when he passed away, but no, the hospital, it was a very large hospital in Burbank. Walt smoked 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And that is what eventually took his life in 1966. Well, we have some direct results of the Disney Corporation. The Disney Corporation, Walt had other small divisions and spin-offs of his multifaceted business life. And one was Retlaw, and Retlaw is Walt backwards. And it expanded itself into television, and it expanded itself. And in 1986, it was here because it owned Clue Television. It owned how many different ones, Fred? Nine television stations in the Inland Empire? Or?
In the Inland Empire and in California, Monterey, and Fresno. It also had thousands of acres of avocados in San Diego, and it had jet leasing. They owned their own jets, and when they weren't using them, they leased out the times and rented jets. Yeah. It's all rental.
And you worked for that corporation?
Yes,
for how long?
For about 6-7 years until they sold it.
Yeah. And Fred loaned me a big Disney book that they gave you at Christmas or something?
Yeah, every year they would give us a Disney gift for Christmas.
So I have it in my house, and Fred allowed me to look through it. And it's a great resource. Sharon Disney was very involved in Retlaw. So the girls were part of the business. And Lillian never forgot where she came from. And she never forgot living on the reservation. And she never forgot her friends who were tribal members. In 1980, she donated $20,000 for the playground equipment and another $200,000 for the locker rooms, restrooms, concession stand, for the new track. When you go through on 95, the track is on the, not the railroad side, the other side, and it's a beautiful track, and the corporation, well, she helped finance that track. So, like I said, she never forgot that. Lillian Bounds, she suffered a stroke in 1997, 31 days or years to the day after the death of her husband, and died the following day. So Lillian then was always deeply in love with this man, Walter, and had two beautiful children and helped so many by allowing Walter to be the creative one. And she was the one with the feet on the ground helping him. And so she died in 1997, but the foundation of Disney family still lives on. And I'm going to do this again because we have a celebration coming up on July 12th. And so the celebration on July 12th will be downtown. And this is Friday night, Dapper night. That's when all the adults can drink wine and dress up like 1920s. That's for the adults. Disney juice will be available downtown. And then this one, and these are all on the back table, this one is for the children on Saturday morning. And that goes 10 o'clock, a parade, a costume contest, performance, and cake. And there's many, many activities. And it'll be in the newspaper. It'll be 360, big type of celebration. Also, I wanted to tell you that because of the Nez Perce County Historical Society, we have a speakers bureau that allows people like myself to give these talks. And we're supported by your generosity. And membership is always something that you can always become a member of our society. And it's worthwhile and promotes this kind of research because a lot of these photographs and materials came from the archives of the Historical Society. Also, on that day that I showed you for the kids, the museum is open free. And we have, if you've not been there, to see the collection of Disney memorabilia that's primarily the old figurines, beautiful, beautiful figurines, original ones that go back about 80 years or 90 years. And we have a collection of those. Mark Wise has a collection, and that's in there. And we're going to have prizes for the kids, and hopefully those parents would take everybody over there in between the times that after the kids get their cake and go over there, and there's prizes, and these are on the back table, both the membership and what the museum is going to do. Lynn, our director of the library, showed you this book, and I see Lynn took her book back so I wouldn't steal it. Anyway, it's wrapped really nicely. This was partially compiled. This is a children's book, an illustrated children's book of Lillian's life. And you can see the large family, the artist then, and you can see the story I've been telling you and how she left and went to the studio and became an anchor for Walt. And this called The Woman Behind the Magic. Well, this artist and the author then were calling Lewiston, and Steve Branting, who is another historian up there, above anything I will ever obtain, but they were in contact here to get information about Lillian's life and Lillian and what everybody knows about Lillian. And so a lot of this book, which the ladies back east then was compiled with the help of historians here. Again, Nez Perce County Historical Society. These are for sale at the museum. We bought 25 of them. Well, now 20. I took 5. And anyway, these books, they're great books. So I did this up at Troy, Idaho, and I gave the Historical Society one of these books, and they're taking it to their library. And then I will donate, my wife and I will donate one to Lapway, at least 1 or 2 of these, so that they have it at their libraries.
Replace the train station where she stopped.
Well, the train station, yeah, there you go. Used to be a, anyway, it's great. So there's a lot of activity over at the territorial capital, and good, not, I meant the territorial capital is over there next to the museum. So that's my spiel on what help I had from the Historical Society's archives and looking through the old photographs. And then I find them and give it, if I find one they don't have, I give it to them. And that's how we pass on our heritage and our history. So I appreciate you coming. Oh, the book returned. There you go. And if you'd like to look at it, you may. All the sheets that I talked to you about are back here, and membership booklets. And if somebody wants to see this, remember it'll be here at noon after the children's festivities on Saturday, the 12th. Thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed it.